All right, so this is the demonstration on how to create a plaster shoe sculpture. I'm going to talk pretty quickly, so that's not a very long video, but please pause every time you need to. So you will need a roll of masking tape or any kind of tape you have laying around the house if you didn't get one. 2 cups, I put small cups, 2 small cups and 2 medium size in your art kit, scissors, and the long strips of poster board that are in your art kit. So you can decide to use the small cups or the bigger cups, or maybe a combination of both. The basic structure of your shoe is going to be 1 cup sitting on the table and 1 cup like this. So you can see that all of this gets covered up by plaster, and we're going to add other kind of sneaker-like parts to it. One of the main things you want to think about is making sure that it sits flat on the table. So as you make this, you want to continue to lay it on the table to make sure that it's not wobbly, and I'll show you that. So once you decide on your configuration, some people are also choosing to use, a second cup if they want to make high tops. Some people add like a little heel with their second cup, so you can get creative with this. I'm going to just show you the basic shape. So this is your basic shape. I like to use the 2 medium ones, but like I said, you have smaller ones if you want to add those or use those. I like to create a little notch in my first cup so that this one can sit in it instead of on the outside. It just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to use the very tip of my scissors to create a little notch for this cup to sit in. I'm going to do that on the top and the bottom, trying to make them even. So you can see I have 2 notches, and this is my horizontal cup, so that my vertical cup can sit inside those notches much easier. So I'm going to tape those together. I'm going to lay it on the table to do that. And I like to have a little bit of tape ready to go so that I can easily grab it. I want to lay it on the table so that it stays nice and flat. Now what we are making today is what's called an armature. And an armature in sculpture is the thing that's going to get covered up. It's kind of like the skeleton. If you remember last year, if you were in art class, we made big paper mache sculptures, and we made armatures first, and then we covered them up. So when you tape your cups together, you'll probably have to do lots of adjusting because you want to make sure that your shoe stays flat. So I just have 2 little pieces on the side there, and my shoe shouldn't be wobbly. If it is, I'm going to continue to adjust it.
All right, the other thing you need to think of when you're doing a 3-dimensional sculpture is what it looks like from all angles. So look at it from the front, make sure it's even from all sides, make sure it sits flat on the table without wobbling, and adjust before you add a bunch more tape. So I'm going to finish taping and making it more secure. So I'm going to add tape to all of the seams, and I will speed through this process.
Okay, so my shoe, this is the basic structure of my shoe. So now we're going to work on all the details. One thing you're going to want to do is probably, you know how sneakers have this dip up here where your ankle is? Depending on what your design is, you might want to add that in. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that into my first cup at the top. You can make it really deep, you can cut into it, you can change the shape of the shoe. So that's one little detail that's going to help. I'm going to now make the sole of the shoe, and the sole of the shoe is the rubber part that goes around, and that I'm going to do with our poster board. So this can be a little bit tricky, but the basic concept is I want to wrap my poster board and make the toe of the shoe like that, and the sole of the shoe on the sides. So this is how I like to do it. You can kind of play around with it and see how you want to try it. But I like to put a little piece of tape on the end, and I'm using my thicker strip of poster board. You might use the thinner one. Again, it's up to you. I'm going to attach it to the back of my shoe right on the edge so that when I lay this flat on the table, it lays flat on the table as well. I'm gonna wrap this poster board around, figure out how long I want my shoe so I can adjust the toe. Now I keep it flat on the table because I want the sole of my shoe to sit on the table. And then I'm gonna fold it where I want to cut. So, because it's probably going to be a little bit too long. So I've got both the front of my poster strip and the back wrapped around. So what I'm going to do now, and I will speed through this, is I'm going to add tape around all of it so that it keeps its shape. And the whole time I'm also going to keep it on the table to make sure that it stays nice and flat. So you can see that I've used lots of tape to kind of fill the seam so that it's nice and smooth. I've also left a little gap here for the toe. You can make that longer if you want. This one was a little bit longer. You can also square that off or make it pointy if you want. I don't know what you want your sneakers to look like. And I've also kind of put tape on the bottom here too. So there's lots of tape involved. But I'm always keeping it flat on my table. If there's a gap here, it's not gonna sit flat. So every once in a while I set it down to make sure that the sole of my shoe was flat. So the next step is to fill this, the toe of the shoe. And you can do that a couple different ways. I'm gonna use this extra little piece of my poster board. And I'm going to make the curve of the toe that kind of turns into like the tongue of your sneaker. So I'm gonna just slide that in here and wrap it up.
So I slide it in the inside and I put a little tape there. And then I'm gonna just fold it and round it up. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. So I'm gonna support this with some tape.
So you can see that it kind of fills in that gap. So you want to be checking and rotating your shoe a lot from all angles to make sure that you have it the way you want it. All right, the very last thing you'll want to do is use the other piece of poster board that you haven't used yet and make kind of the back. Usually shoes have this like seam in the back that also makes the little loop at the top. So you can honestly, you know, use this piece for any kind of design element that you want to include. But I use it for this little loop in the back. So what I do is I measure about 1/2 inch above the top of my shoe and I fold it in half and I cut that so that I have this piece and I tape it going right up the back of my shoe. And it just creates just another little detail.
For the sneaker. So I'm gonna go ahead and tape that.
Okay, so before you start the plaster, you want to make sure that your design is how you want it to be. You are welcome to get really creative with this. Some people add, with the poster board, they add like sides to where the laces go. So a lot of people do different things. You can also just paint that in later. So you want to make sure that your shoe is nice and stable so that you literally can throw it and it won't break apart. So that's how much tape you want. You'll want to get rid of all your seams and make sure they're nice and as smooth as possible. And you'll want to make sure that it doesn't wobble on the table. So this is the armature of your sculpture. This is kind of like the skeleton that the plaster is gonna lay on. So next we're gonna do the plaster, and this is the messy part. So you'll want to make sure that you have some time. People in class did their plaster. They were able to make their shoe and do all of the plaster within an hour. So that gives you kind of a timeline. So I'm gonna go ahead and get set up for plaster.